In the early 1930s, the arrival of the talkies forced a crisis. Heavy sound equipment anchored the camera, threatening cinema's visual soul. Avant-garde directors watched as fluid, expressive visual poetry was abruptly replaced by stilted, theatrical dialogue recordings. The visual language of the medium appeared to be dying. Clair, a filmmaker refined in the silent avant-garde, observed this shift. He refused to accept that adding audio required sacrificing the camera's mobility. He aimed to orchestrate a world where the boundary between music, noise, and life completely dissolved, ensuring the audio track drove the visuals forward, instead of freezing them in place. He achieved this in 1931 with his masterpiece, A New La Liberte. By synchronizing the rhythmic editing of the picture to precise audio cues, Clair constructed a specific visual argument. The modern industrial assembly line functions exactly like a prison. He used the technology of synchronized sound to expose the dehumanizing effects of a society entirely dictated by machines. The narrative centers on two inmates, Louis and Emile, serving time together. Their existence is tightly managed within a cramped, rigidly structured cell. Every square inch is designed to restrict autonomy and enforce order. During the day, they perform monotonous physical labor in a workshop, assembling identical objects for hours. The two men plot an escape. However, the execution unravels, leaving them separated mid-attempt. Louis scales the wall and evades capture. Emile is caught and sent back to finish his sentence alone. Out in the world, Louis applies his ambition to commerce. He quickly scales the social ladder, transforming himself from an escaped convict into the wealthy owner of a massive phonograph manufacturing empire. Years later, Emile is released from his state-mandated sentence. Needing a job, he wanders into Louis's sprawling factory and is immediately absorbed into the uniform-clad workforce, tasked with the precise assembly of phonograph parts. While Louis sits in the owner's office and Emile mans the conveyor belt, both men are trapped by the exact same repetitive mechanisms they experienced behind bars. The state-run cell has simply been replaced by a corporate one. The factory floor and the prison block are constructed from the same visual vocabulary, rendering the two environments functionally interchangeable. Louis' sprawling manufacturing empire is dominated by imposing, rigid Art Deco architecture. The sets feature aggressive geometric patterns and sharp, high-contrast lighting. This design minimizes the human figure, stripping away individuality to enforce a sense of total conformity. He explicitly mirrors these environments in his editing, cutting directly from the layout of the prison dormitory to the layout of the factory floor. The industrial workstations run in the exact same parallel lines as the cell block bunks. The workers move in absolute mechanical unison. Their physical pacing is visually indistinguishable from the inmates' forced marches in the prison yard. This conformity is enforced by the immense scale of the sprawling automotive-style assembly lines. When a laborer must match the uninterrupted pace of a conveyor belt, their physical movement is restricted to a few repeating gestures. The machine dictates exactly where they stand and how they move. Through this deliberate architectural framing, the viewer is forced to recognize that the modern assembly line operates as a meticulously engineered prison. A factory does not need to deploy armed guards or erect iron bars to keep its occupants captive. The relentless rhythm of the clock assumes the role of the enforcer. Every biological need is subjugated entirely to an artificial, mechanized schedule. The company relies on time cards and hourly supervision to meticulously track the physical presence of every individual on the floor. The ringing of the shift bell dictates when movement is permitted, serving the exact same function as the warden's whistle. Because a machine does not tire, it establishes a continuous, unforgiving baseline for production. The laborer is constantly driven by the psychological anxiety of falling behind this impossible, non-human pace. This temporal control strips the worker of personal autonomy. They are integrated into the manufacturing process as living extensions of the factory's own gears. This form of captivity escapes scrutiny. It is highly insidious because it is legally and socially defined as employment. To drive this point home, Clair utilized the newly available synchronized audio technology to amplify the sensation of total mechanization. He enlisted composer Georges Auric to design a highly structured sonic landscape. They deliberately avoided the conventions of early Hollywood musicals. You will not see characters stop their tasks to spontaneously burst into song. Instead, they designed a world where the factory environment itself generates the music. The harsh clatter of machinery, the shuffling of uniform footfalls, and the strict ringing bells are synchronized into a single unified motoric tempo. Auric layers this industrial noise with upbeat French chanson instrumentation. The light woodwinds, playful accordions, and snappy percussion provide a sharp, ironic counterpoint to the soul-crushing labor occurring on screen. By scoring the factory floor as a perfectly timed choreographed ballet, Clair highlights the sheer absurdity of human beings operating in mechanical lockstep. The worker is now inseparable from the engine, a biological instrument playing a predetermined part in a larger industrial orchestra. Clair's specific structural vocabulary laid the groundwork for a broader lineage of cinematic anti-industrialism. 5 years later, Charlie Chaplin premiered his own cinematic milestone, Modern Times. The structural parallels between the two works were undeniable. Both films relied heavily on frantic assembly line sequences, a deep-seated anxiety regarding synchronization, and the ultimate dehumanization of the modern workforce. The similarities were so pronounced that the German film studio Tobis Klangfilm initiated a massive copyright lawsuit against Chaplin. They specifically accused him of intellectual plagiarism, citing the shared mechanics and structural motifs of the assembly sequences. Despite the studio's demands, Clair refused to participate in the lawsuit against his cinematic hero. He stated publicly that if Chaplin had indeed borrowed ideas from his work, he considered it an honor, a small repayment of the immense creative debt he owed to Chaplin's earlier silent films. Clair moved cinema beyond simple visual gags, defining the specific structural vocabulary used to depict the friction between humanity and the machine. As the film reaches its climax, Louis and Émile arrive at a shared philosophical conclusion. Louis recognizes that his immense wealth and sprawling corporate empire require the same relentless management as his former incarceration. He has simply built himself a larger prison. Together, they make a radical decision. They abandon the factory floor, forfeit the corporate wealth, and withdraw from the industrial system entirely. They adopt the tramp spirit, the philosophical response to industrialization. Trading the factory's geometric tyranny for the dirt road, they reclaim a life without schedules. Victory over the industrial machine is not achieved by breaking the gears, but by entirely rejecting its schedule and walking away. À nous la liberté remains a vital artifact of film history, capturing the exact era when the cinematic medium learned to deploy synchronized sound without sacrificing its visual soul. Clair took a technology that threatened to paralyze the camera and turned it into a finely tuned mechanism for social critique. In doing so, he left behind a lasting question regarding our relationship with the tools we build. Are we the masters working the machines, or have the machines quietly restructured society so that we work for them? This was brought to you by Stalls or Circle. Thank you for listening.